Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Is my mic working? Beautiful, beautiful. Well, first of all, truly, I want to thank you all for coming out here today to listen to me speak. Because it never ceases to amaze me that people actually want to listen to me, which is good. Because for many, many years, and you'll get to hear part of my story in a minute, no one really listened. And but now, I feel in some weird way that I've come full circle, because I used to live in London, and as you'll hear in a moment, my journey was an interesting one, and I used to be a broker in the city of London, maybe a few miles from here. And on the outside, I pretty much had everything that you would want. But on the inside, I was wearing a mask on the outside, and the world thought that everything was fine. If I'm not mistaken, there are people in this room that feel the same way, in the sense that we wear a mask. We tell the world we're fine. Oh, I'm fine. I'm okay. But we're not. And for many, many, many years, that was what I was doing. And through my journeys across the world, I realized something very profound. That the way to get through someone's mask is to see them. And what do I mean by when you see another human being? What I mean is that we all wear this mask, and when you see another human being, you tell that person through your heart, through your kindness, that they matter. And too many of us go through this life feeling like we don't matter, feeling like we are not important, feeling like the world is just going by and that we don't matter in this great scheme of things. But I'm here today to hopefully inspire you to know that the simplest way and the most beautiful way to see another human being is simply to be kind. Like, kindness has a bad rap, right? Like, kindness, it's not very cool. It's not very hip to be kind, right? But I would like to say that, in fact, the coolest thing that we can do for each other and ourselves is simply to show up with love in our hearts. I speak at schools, and sometimes kids ask me, "So what does kindness mean to you, Mr. Leon?" You don't have to call me Mr. Leon if you don't want to. What does kindness mean to you? And they expect this epic answer. And the answer that I give them, and the answer that I'm going to give you today, is very, very simple. Kindness is simply making someone feel less alone. That's it. If I'm not mistaken, every person in this room is a human being. May not be able to say that in 50 years, but right now, we're all human beings. And if we are all human beings, then we all know what it feels like to be alone. And if we all know what it feels like to be alone, we know that it doesn't particularly feel very good. And the way to take someone out of their pain is simply to be kind. The truth is, I don't need to say anything else. I can leave right now. Because that's it. That's the message. It's a universal message that I can give to a 5-year-old and I can give to a 95-year-old. When you help someone feel less alone, you are being kind. So I talked briefly about my work as a broker. I want to go a little bit further back. When I was a kid, many, many years ago, unfortunately, but whatever, I was bullied pretty profoundly. I would walk into school pretty much every day and feel inside like my insides were being destroyed. Every day. And people sometimes say to me, Leon, why do you go around the world and talk about kindness? And the answer lies when I was at school. Because I know, as I'm sure many of you guys know too, what it feels like when someone is profoundly unkind to you. What it feels like in your heart, in your very being. Not what your mask tells the world, but what you feel like when someone decides to be unkind. So I was bullied for many years. I was a sensitive kid. And I ended up going into the brokerage firm. And to be honest with you, I felt in some ways that the bullying continued. Sat behind that desk for many years. And very depressed, very alone, very disconnected. The energy that I feel in this room today is not something that I was feeling when I went and sat behind that desk all those years ago. Let me tell you that. Because many of us can see with our eyes, but how many of us can see with our hearts? That's the magic. So I sat behind that desk, and I thought, this is my life. And this is going to be my life until I retire when I'm 65. And there's nothing I can do about it. Everyone else out there will sit there and think to themselves, I have a great life, but I know what's going on. Because I know that everyone in this room knows what it feels like to be alone. And I know that everyone in this room knows what it feels like when you are in pain. And it is okay to not be okay. And I never realized that. I was like, oh my God, I can tell someone that I'm not okay? So, when I give my speeches to the kids, I get them to come up and share their pain. Because if there's one thing that I would like you guys to get from this little chat, just one, it's to share your pain. Don't hold it in. Because when you hold it in, it becomes like a cancer and it destroys people's lives. Share your pain. So, I'm going to walk down here. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to think to yourself, what is the Englishman doing? And I'm wondering who is willing to be as courageous as the kids that I talk to, the 14, 15, 16, 13-year-old kids, and share with us what it feels like when someone is unkind to you. When someone goes out of their way to make you feel like you don't matter. Because I'll tell you something, every single person in this room matters. And when someone goes out of their way to make us feel like we are not important, A, that's not okay. And B, inside, I talk for myself, often I emotionally collapse. So who is willing to share with us what it feels like when someone is unkind to you, when someone bullies you?
Yes, Leon, thanks for coming down and giving this talk today. It's quite a common story, just being mugged at knife point. That's not too uncommon in certain areas in London. And yeah, it's a scar that stayed with me for, since my youth. But I think that's a perfect example of an unkind act. And yeah, I thought I'd just share that.
All right, man, thank you. And how did that feel? Like when that happened to you? Because obviously that's a major thing, but what happened in your heart when that happened?
Just like totally, incapable of doing anything about it. A lot of hatred and wanting to go to the gym, wanting to make loads of changes in my life to, make sure that never happened again.
Beautiful. Okay, one more.
Do you need the background or just the emotion?
You can say whatever you want. What it felt like, what happened, what they did.
So I was 21, worked for an investment bank with a team. It was a sales team. I was the junior, and the lady there would always pick on me. So the presentation wasn't right, the font wasn't the JP Morgan style, and it was a massive big thing. Like something small was completely blown up. Or I would put the color differently. It was just ridiculous. If I think back now, 10 years later, I look back and I think that's absolutely ridiculous. But when you're young and you're a kid, it's your career and you really want to make something out of it. And so I felt that I wasn't good enough. I felt isolated. I felt that I was a failure. I felt I didn't belong. Yeah, just that. And I felt I didn't have a voice. And I wasn't strong enough to fight back. Yeah.
Many of us, we feel like we don't have a voice. And we feel like we don't have a voice because we were never seen. And we feel like we don't deserve to have a voice. I wish I'm not going to ask you how old you are because that's rude, but I wish your current aged self could go back to that 21-year-old kid and tell her that she mattered, because she did. And what I find is that we don't want to share our pain because we're like, oh, this is small. Yeah, it's not a big thing. But little pinpricks, constantly, for years and years, they become big things. Kindness changes lives. It really does. Because kindness isn't just that one word. It's compassion. It's empathy. It's about making a commitment to living in a certain way. Now, I don't want anyone to leave this room and think to themselves, this bald Englishman came to my, whatever we call this, and gave me this speech and told me I had to be perfect. And that if I wasn't kind, I was doomed. That is not under any circumstances what I'm saying. No one is perfect. Trust me. Let me give you some of the telephone numbers of my ex-girlfriends. They will tell you how imperfect I am. I'll tell you another story. So, I like doing nutty things. I decided I would follow this Indian guru for 2 weeks. I would give him my passport, my phone, all my money, my computer, everything. After day 5, this guy was beginning to really piss me off. Yeah? He was trying to make me better. He was trying to inspire me, be kinder, be more compassionate, have more empathy. And one day I turned around to him and I said, listen, man, I am not Gandhi. He never said much to me. And he keeps on going. After day 8, day 9, I kept on doing that because that was my new mantra. That was my way I was going to tell this guy to leave me alone. I'm not Gandhi. One day, on day 12, goes into his pocket, takes out an iPhone. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. He says to me, I want you to Google Gandhi and wife. It's like, all right. Go on the iPhone, try and look at the football scores, but it doesn't work out. And I Google, and I go down. And what I realized was that not even Gandhi was Gandhi. There is no perfection. I am not espousing perfection. We commit to our jobs, we commit to our families. But how many of us commit to living with an open heart? I would go so far to say not too many. But kindness changes lives. So we're going to do one more thing. I'm not going to walk down here so you guys don't get deafened. Who's willing to share with us how you feel in your heart when someone believes in you, when someone is kind to you, when someone gives you a shoulder to cry on, when someone gives you kindness? Okay, the gentleman in the front.
So how much of the story do you need? Just like...
Whatever you feel like sharing.
What I really identify with your entire backstory, you said. Like 6 months ago, I was in a very similar situation, in a job in the city, really didn't enjoy it, knew it wasn't me, got on with the people I was working with, but very much not my kind of thing. Knew there was a lot more out there, quit my job, went on a crazy trip, and I'm now in the process of trying to create a much more exciting, much better life for myself. But it's a very unconventional way of trying to do it, kind of similar to how you've tried to do it as well. Every single day, it can be quite overwhelming because there's no real route, no one's really done it before, and there's not many people to speak to about it. So whenever you confide in someone and they just relay kindness back to you and positive thoughts, it makes you realize that it really is possible and allows you to continue on really what you want.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let me tell you a little story. So when I was a kid, I had a teacher called Mrs. Mann. And you just shared what it felt like when someone was kind to you, right? When someone gives you hope. Let me tell you a little story that hopefully will inspire you to know that your actions, they matter. Every day, she would look at me in the eyes. She knew what was going on in my life. She would look at me in the eyes and she'd say, I believe in you. Every day, for years. I didn't believe in myself, right? I was like emotionally on the floor, but every day. And years went by, and when something bad happened in my life, I would think back to Mrs. Mann. I'd be like, she believed in me. And I would embody that feeling. That is the power of being kind to another human being. It stays with us forever. So thank you for sharing that. So I ended up in Hollywood. And life doesn't always go like that, right? Sometimes it goes very far down into the ground. And, up, down, up, down. Sat behind a desk again for another 7 years. This time I was working as not as a broker, as a TV guy in Hollywood, which is not renowned for its kindness. Let's just leave it at that. And I was chasing all the wrong things: cars, houses, ex-girlfriends. And one day I was walking down the street in Hollywood Boulevard, and I saw a homeless guy, with a sign that said, "Kindness is the best medicine." I was like, kindness is the best medicine. Okay. When you have an epiphany, something just clicks. And in that moment, I realized once again I'd been following all the wrong paths, my own wrong paths. So I came up with what I thought was this brilliant idea. I was going to buy a vintage yellow motorbike. I was going to call it Kindness One, sort of like Air Force One, but a little bit yellower. I was going to have no money, no gas, no food, no place to stay, nothing. But this time there was going to be a twist. And the twist was that unsuspecting Good Samaritans were going to get a life-changing gift. Every single one of you has a Bentley waiting for you outside, just so you know that. Except you. And you. I thought it was brilliant, so I went back to my then girlfriend, and I'm like, look, I'm going to be away for 6 months. She starts crying. And in that moment, I was like, what? This is amazing. And I remember a couple of months ago, a woman came up to me after the speech, and she's like, Leon? I'm like, yes. She's like, you really don't understand women, do you? And I was like, you're right, I don't. I really don't. So anyway, I figured it out with my then girlfriend. And I went on this journey. And I'm going to introduce you to a man right now that epitomizes the power of how you show up in the world. I would go up to people in the streets, and I would say to them, can I stay in your house tonight? And they would say, no. And that's okay, right? That's okay. It's all right. So I went up to this chap, and I asked him that. I told him a bit about the story, and I said, can I stay in your house tonight? And he turns around to me and goes, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless. So in that moment, I feel a lot of shame. I'm doing a social experiment. This chap has nothing. About to walk off, and he turns around and he says, you know what? If you want, you can stay with me tonight. I will feed you. I will protect you. And I will give you some clothes. Every fiber of my being was saying, Leon, you are not staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight. I will not let you. But there was that one little tiny counterintuitive part of me that was like, Leon, my friend, you are staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight. And that's exactly what happened. And Tony taught me a truly profound lesson. He taught me that kindness is free. It does not matter how much wealth you think you have, you think you need to have, you do not have. Kindness is free. How you show up in the world with each other, with the people that you love, with the people that you may not love very much, matters profoundly. If a homeless man can be as kind as Tony was to me, then there is no excuse for every single person sitting in this room, myself included. There are times when people piss me off, because I'm human. And I want to be mean. I'm like, man, this man's face always comes to me. If I can be kind, then so can you. Every single person in this room matters, right? Is there anyone in this room that doesn't matter? Beautiful. So if every single person in this room matters, then every single person sitting next to you matters. And every single person behind you matters. And in front of you matters. And the person at Starbucks matters. And the person who cuts you off on the freeway matters. You get to choose how you show up in the world. For many years, I sat behind that desk as a broker, and I'm not saying that all brokers are assholes, but I was an asshole. And I would never have been able to come up here and give this speech, because I was a professional asshole. I really was. That was a choice. Sometimes people say to me, well, is there any, excuse for not being kind? And there is. There is an excuse. And that excuse is trauma. Many of us have suffered trauma, whatever it may be. And when trauma happens, our hearts shut down. Why would I open my heart up for it to be squashed? Our hearts, they shut down. But if you can commit to going out into the world and fixing what's going on in here, then there is no excuse. There really isn't. You get to choose how you treat yourselves and how you treat each other. That's just a fact. So I said to Tony in the morning, I said, Tony, take me somewhere where you felt loved. And he sits there and he thinks about it. He's like, I felt loved at school. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, wow, you did not go to an English school. I took him to his school, sat him down, told him the truth, that I was going to give back to him. I put him up in an apartment and I sent him back to school. And Tony says to me to this day, because we still stay in touch, he said, Leon, you changed my life. And I say the same thing every single time. Tony, it is you who changed my life. Because one act of unbelievable kindness cracked open my heart to a degree where it was never going to close again. I only slept on those streets for one night. He did it for years. How you guys show up matters. Who has a dog? Okay, not as many as I would have imagined. Who loves animals? Okay, good. I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up if you hate animals. I'm not going to go there. So this is my dog, Winston Churchill. Yeah. And believe it or not, he has a sister called, please don't leave the room, Margaret Thatcher. And I love my dog with every fiber of my being. I am so patient with Winston. I am so kind to Winston. Even though he annoys me a lot, I am still kind to him. And one day, I sat there and I thought to myself, what would happen if I went out into the world and I treated you the same way that I treated Winnie? With the same love and the same kindness and the same patience. And I was like, oh my goodness me, I'm never going to share this in public because they'll think I'm a nut job. But for 7 days, I went out into the world and I gave Winnie love as often as I could. And once again, I realized that kindness is a choice. How you show up, it's a choice. If you can be, I assume you're all kind to your dogs, right? I assume, okay? If you can be kind and loving to your dogs, then you know how to be kind. So then why not give it to each and every single person that you meet? Imperfectly, but why not? You all have postcards, right? And on your postcards, it says, I helped someone feel less alone. Because remember, kindness is simply helping someone feel less alone. So we're going to do a little challenge. The challenge is as follows. On the back, I know it says homework. It's supposed to be for little kids, but we're all kids in here anyway, big kids, little kids. So the homework is pretty simple. The homework is, you have to go out into your community tomorrow and do one act of kindness. One act of Winnie love. You're going to write it down. You're going to send it to me. And then, for every postcard I get, I'm going to give a kid a free book. The aim is to give 10,000 books. We've already given 5,000 books. Why the book, you may be asking yourself? Well, when I was in high school, I spent 2 years in the library by myself eating lunch every day. Had no friends. And then one day, a kid comes up to me and he says one sentence. He says, "Would you like to come and eat lunch with me and my friends?" I share that story because everyone in this room has the power to change the world. You may be like, oh my God, here he goes. How on earth am I going to change the world? Exactly the same way that that kid changed my world. Because all you have to do to change the world is to change one life. That's it. That's it. And the most beautiful and most profound way to change a life is to be kind. I mentioned earlier in the chat that people sometimes say to me, Leon, why the kindness, man? Why are you talking about kindness? Is it because you want to make money? Why are you talking about kindness? I say to them, look, guys, if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't be talking about kindness. I'd be talking about something else. The reason is because I know firsthand, as I'm sure you guys do too, the power of how one person can affect your life negatively and the power of how one person can change your life positively. You get to choose. A 9-year-old kid once came up to me after the speech and she said, Mr. Leon. I'm like, I could get used to be called Mr. Leon, I can tell you that. She's like, kindness is not rocket science. She's right. She's right. You know, sometimes people come up to me and say, you know, Leon, kindness is a virtue, and I don't have that virtue. And I'm like, really? Kindness is a virtue. Tell that to our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago that needed to cooperate with each other, that needed to have a sense of community to stay alive. Kindness is who we are. Kindness is who we are. It doesn't matter that the bad things are also who we are. I get it. But instead of putting the magnifying glass on all the bad, what about putting the magnifying glass on the good? Kindness is who we are. Community is who we are. As I'm sure there are many of you in this room that have felt this, I have felt profoundly alone and been helped by one person. Because that's all it takes. That's all it takes. So I met this doctor in Vietnam who has dedicated his life to giving free surgery to poor Vietnamese farmers. Every day, he goes out into his community and he gives Free surgery. In Vietnam, it costs $30 to fix cataracts. 30. That's like what, 27 pounds or something like that? And there are hundreds of thousands of people that don't have that capacity, that money to do that, and he's dedicated his life to doing that. I am not suggesting that you quit your jobs, you go to Vietnam, and you set up an eye clinic. You can if you want. What I am suggesting is that how you choose to live your life matters. I am not saying don't make money. Make as much money as you want, and then give me some. But if all you do is make money, and you're not giving back, and you're not serving, it's a hollow life. I will tell you a little interesting story. I was giving a speech in New York a couple of weeks ago. Gave the speech. I thought it went well. I was walking around New York City. As those of you who've been in New York City know, and from those of you who've been in London, because you have been in London, we walk around and we ignore everyone. Most of the time. I am as guilty as you in doing that. I gave this speech. For whatever reason, I was feeling in the zone. I sat down, had a drink, not an alcoholic one. And in that moment, I felt connected to everyone. I felt a person who I don't know was like my brother. A woman who I don't know was like my sister. I felt connected to everyone. We like to feel like everyone is different. Oh, he's a Christian, or he's a Muslim, or he's a Buddhist, or he lives in Iraq, or he lives in Iran, or he lives in Texas. We are not the same. I will tell you one thing. One of the greatest lessons I learned on my journeys. We are all the same. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religion you are. At base, we are all the same. We just want to be seen. I was sleeping in India in not a particularly pleasant place. Raw sewage was going down the street. Woke up in the morning, saw this Indian mother kissing her 10-year-old daughters goodbye for school. And in that moment, I realized her love for her kids is the same as your love for your kids. We are all the same. And kindness is a universal language that many of us have forgotten. But it is still part of who we are. Some of us may be more fluent in it in others, but it is part of us. How you show up matters. So I ended up in Ho Chi Minh City, and the journey sometimes went well, sometimes not so well. My bike had been impounded by the border guards in Ho Chi Minh City. I was having a little bit of a meltdown. I am a bit melodramatic at times. Sitting on these stairs in Ho Chi Minh City, and a guy comes up to me and he goes, "Are you okay?" I was like, well, told him my sob story. He turns around and he says, "You know what? It's your lucky day. I am this happened exactly like I'm explaining it. I am the director of the Ho Chi Minh City Opera House. And you are sitting on the stairs of the Ho Chi Minh City Opera House." And I'm like, wonderful news, thank you for that. And he says to me, "Why don't you come to the opera tonight?" And I'm like, man, is this happening? I said, why not? I've got nothing else to do. I go to the opera that night. 20 minutes before the end, he comes and taps me on the shoulder and he says, "You know what? I want you to go on stage." And I said to him, "My friend, that is a bad idea. And he says, no, don't worry about it. Go and play your heart out. Let it all out. I was like, okay, I will. He dresses me up in all black and gives me some drums. Last 5 minutes of the show, he sends me out onto stage. Something epic happens. At the end, I get a standing ovation. It was more of a pity standing ovation, but I get the standing ovation. And in that moment, I feel seen. Yes, the external version of being seen, but I feel seen. And it all starts to make sense. What did that teacher all those years ago do for me? She saw me. By being kind, she saw me. What did I give to Tony? A homeless man that under 99 times out of 100, I would have just walked past as if he did not exist. I saw him. I saw him. The doctor. What does the doctor do for all those people he helps? Basically, he says to each and every one of them, you matter enough to me that I am going to help you. He saw them. The most powerful thing that you can give another human being is to see them. That's it. And the most beautiful way of seeing another human being is to be kind. You don't have to be perfect, but to be kind. You matter enough to me that I will be kind to you. I want to share one more thing, and that is that if you believe that kindness does not change the world, and that you don't have the power to change the world by how you show up, the person standing on this stage today would not be here if it wasn't for that one teacher, Mrs. Mann. When she was being kind, and when she saw me, and when she was a witness to my suffering, she gave me the strength to go out into the world and do what I do. Every time you interact with another person, you have the power to do exactly what she did. It is without exaggeration that I wouldn't be standing here today. Because one person, just like you, chose to see another person and to be kind. You all have that power. All of you. So, we're going to do one more little thing, if you're willing, and you don't have to do it. So everyone stand up for a moment. And put your hand on your heart. And really take this as seriously as you can. And on the count of 3, simply just say, on the count of 3, simply just say, I matter. Okay, on the count of 3. I matter. Oh, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. Okay. And just like feel it, really, really, truly, deeply feel it. This may Seems silly, but trust me, it's not. Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I matter. Okay, second thing we're going to do, keep your hand on your heart. Simply, on the count of 3, turn to the person that you came with. And if you didn't come with anyone, turn to the person in front of you or behind you. And simply say to them, you matter to me. Seriously. You matter to me. Oh. Okay. You matter to me. Okay. And keep standing, keep standing. Okay, the last thing to do is simply just give hugs. Give hugs to each other. Give hugs. Do I not get a hug? Okay, you can sit down if you want. We've forgotten that feeling that we just had. We can live there if we want. We can live there if we want. Okay. So now I'm going to open up for some questions. Each question is only £1,000, so it's all good. So reduced rate. And one thing I will say is be careful what you ask me, because I will answer with 100% honesty. How's it having a sidecar on the motorbike? Well, who's watched the show? A few of you, okay. So for those of you who haven't watched the show, I have like a love-hate relationship with Kindness One, because Kindness One keeps breaking down. I hate Kindness One when I'm near him, and I love him when I have nothing to do with him. So having a sidecar, it's a bit of a challenge, but people tend to love sidecars, so that's a good thing. Okay?
Thanks for the talk. Really enjoyed it. I wondered if you were how you are now, if you were to go back to that child in school and met the bully or the bullies, what you would say to them.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would let my 14, 15-year-old kid know that he was safe. I would protect him. The second thing I would do is I would tell the bully that it's not okay. And whatever you're going through, it's not okay to take it out on someone else. And if the bully kept on going, I would take my kid and I would find a way for him not to have to go through that. I'm going to get rich. Okay.
Thanks very much for this very, very kind and useful speech and talk. I just wanted to ask you about your experience when you traveled from New York to Hollywood. So you talked about the positive experiences and the kindness of people. Did you have any negative experience? Like,
Sure.
did anyone sort of give you any negative experience that was
Sure.
that you thought you would share?
And the answer is, of course. Yeah? The answer is, again, I don't want anyone to leave and like, oh, I just gave the blue sky version of life, which I guess I did. I forgot to mention this part, which is, of course, there are people out there that are unpleasant. That's putting it mildly. There are people out there that are bullies. There are people out there that are worse than bullies. Yeah? What do we do with them? So people sometimes say to me, I can't be kind because if I'm kind, I'll be squashed. Yeah? I can't be vulnerable, because if I'm vulnerable, I'll be squashed. And I tell them the story of Muhammad Ali. So Muhammad Ali, an imperfect person, but someone that went out into the world with love, with kindness in his heart. How many people in this room would mess with Muhammad Ali? Not many. And my point is simple. You can be kind and you can be strong. Like, I will be kind to you as often and as much as I possibly can. But if my kindness is reciprocated with something damaging, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to put a boundary in place. I'm like, you know what? Please, don't go across this boundary. Because I'm not going to allow, if you allow someone to beat you, you are being unkind to yourself. So yes, there were unkind people out there. We all know that. But I found a little secret. If you kind of start like living from your heart, more often than not, you don't spend much time with those unkind people. They don't find their way to you. But when they come, you have a boundary. You can't cross this boundary, thank you very much. Otherwise, there will be consequences, whatever those consequences will be. That doesn't mean I can't be kind. It doesn't mean if I'm going to protect myself that all of a sudden I'm mean. No. You know, kindness is strength. Yeah? Okay. I'm counting, by the way, £3,000. You.
Does Mrs. Mann know?
Oh, I wanted to ask Mrs. Mann a question.
Ask a question to her.
Have you been back to see Mrs. Mann?
Same question. Yeah, does Mrs. Mann know?
Does Mrs. Mann know? Excellent question. So, you have the power, remember, to change someone's life positively and negatively. I had a teacher, not Mrs. Mann, another I'm going to answer the question. I had another teacher, I'm not going to mention his name, let's call him Mr. Williams, because that's his name. And he was not particularly pleasant. We'll leave it at that. So what do I do for him? Every book I write, every show I do, dear Mr. Williams, I hope you're having a happy day. Best regards, Leon. And I send it to him. Okay? That's my way of saying your unkindness didn't stop me from being the man I became. Mrs. Mann, my first book, the opening acknowledgement, dedication, is Dr. Susan Mann. Thank you for believing in me. She knows. And I've spoken to her since then, and she knows. And one day she will be sitting in a room like this, and I will share that story, and she will be there. And I will get her to stand up, and you guys can all clap for her. So, yes.
I get what you say about you need to put barriers. So in your whole documentary, it was basically an on-the-court example of how people were kind to you. And your answer there, can you give me like an on-the-court example? Because that was off the court. Can you give me an on-the-court example of what you do and how you deal with people who you experience in your journey that were dicks to you?
Okay. So why don't we do the following? You're not a dick, I get that. Pretend to be one. Say something mean to me. Say, like, I'm going to come and ask you for a place to stay. So I'm going to be like really excited. Like, oh my God, I'm doing this journey around the world.
Yeah, but that's me. But what about on your journey?
Yeah. So we're going to role play, and I'll tell you what I would do.
Okay, you can't give me an example from your journey. Because that's fine. Like in role play,
I get your point.
It means nothing, frankly.
Okay, I get your point.
It's more on your journey.
Yeah, I
it's
get
more
your point.
On the court.
I get your point.
Yeah.
So, out of 10 people, 9 would say no. Okay? And those 9 people have every right to say no. I have put myself in a situation that I'm relying on other people's kindness, and they may not be kind. So, for example, Southeast Asian border guards were not particularly pleasant. For some reason, they didn't like the motorbike. They didn't like the yellow motorbike, and they weren't very nice to me. What am I going to do? Am I going to argue with them? I'm not. I would say to them, okay, I tried my best to get them to give me the bike. I tried my best to them to let us get out instead of 7 hours to get in 1 hour. But I would be like, okay, they're not being pleasant. That's fine. That's all right. Just as much as you can, be kind. As much as you can, show them that it's all going to be okay. So I would try my best to be kind out of, obviously, if we go from Southeast Asian border guards to just saying no to the bike, to them like trying to beat me up, then that's a different reaction. But in that moment when they're saying no, they have every right to say no. Who am I to think that they should say yes? So if they're going to be unkind to me, okay, they're unkind to me, fine, all right, I'll just move on. So that's basically what I did. If someone is unkind to me, I'm like, okay, fine, thank you very much, and I move on. Now that's much harder to do when it's a family member, when it's someone in your workplace. You can't just be like, oh, okay, I'm moving on. Yeah? But you can teach them how to treat you. Yeah? Because you can be like, oh my God, it's okay for you to treat me this way by how you behave. Or you can put in place a system where, like, you know what? That is not okay. It is not okay that you treated me that way, and I will not accept it anymore. Again, your question's a great one, but it's pretty complex. Yeah? So basically, when I was on the journey, I would do what I just said, which is I would just be like, okay, and I would move off. I wouldn't engage. People say throw fire, fight fire with fire. I say fight fire with water. Okay? All right.
Hi, Leon. How do you reconcile kindness with honesty? And I speak from experience here. So I run my own business, and part of that means the standards I have and the standards I work to means sometimes what others are helping me with isn't good enough. So rather than tell them it's not good enough, I end up making excuses just so I'm kind to them. I don't want to damage confidence. I don't want to harm people. But then there's always something eating away at me about the lack of honesty of, have I been kind enough to tell them the truth? And do I want to be that person? How do you reconcile that?
So let's say you did something bad. Whatever. Yeah, I'm your boss. You did something bad. I'd be like, what's your name?
Amrit.
So I'd say, okay, so first of all, I know that you put your whole heart into this. And I respect that, and I'm grateful for that, and thank you for that. I do need to share that what you've done hasn't reached the standards that we need for you in this moment. Yeah. So you've done a great job in the sense of you put your whole heart into it, and I appreciate that. But the end result isn't what we need. So let's talk about how to get the end result to exactly where we need to go. So on one level, you've been honest and kind and firm in the same sentence. Yeah. Does that make sense? So you've told the chap that you appreciate his work. You've also told him that his work isn't good enough, and you've said, let's fix it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. As you can see, I've had history in doing that.
So my question's kind of two-pronged. First off, it's an assumption, but was your altruistic tendencies in Kindness Diaries fully funded by Netflix? Yeah.
Oh, no. Is that the question?
That was the first part of the question.
Okay.
Was it?
No.
Okay. Oh. And the second part of the question, assuming that it was what was the experience collaborating with a large organization on your idea?
Sure. Great question. So, I left my brokerage life. I did my journeys around the world, around America, relying on kindness, ended up sitting behind a desk again, remember? In Hollywood. What I was doing there was I was running a television production company, okay? So the television production company, which is called Winston Enterprises, yes, funded the show, yeah? The gifts were funded by me, okay? And the reality is that the gifts, people sometimes say, how on earth did you fund all these gifts? They weren't that expensive. To help someone shift their life, it doesn't cost that much. Yeah? What was it like talking with Netflix? Well, when I first started doing all these shows, people would come up to me and they'd say like, you're never going to make any money with kindness. No one is ever going to buy a show on kindness. I was like, you're probably right, but I'm going to keep going. And I kept on going. And it proved to a certain degree they were right, because no one wanted my show. I was like, man, you calm, kindness, compassion. But then something happened. Our friend, Mr. Donald Trump, became president, and all of a sudden it became topical to be kind. And all of a sudden people wanted my show. So I actually never dealt directly with Netflix because my company sold the rights to a distribution company, and the distribution company talked with Netflix. Yeah? There's a season 2 of the show coming. This time it's different. This time it was funded primarily through Netflix, as opposed to being funded by my production company. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
I wondered which of the things, apart from your homeless man, had the most profound effect on you. Which one you loved most?
So, I was in India, and I ended up, for those of you who've been to Delhi, there's a famous market called the Paraganj market, which is not like an English market, leave it at that. And I ended up meeting this chap, and he took me back to his house. I ended up staying the night with him and his wife and his kids. And the next morning, I purchased a rickshaw for him. This is an example of how it doesn't cost that much money. It cost $3,000 to buy this chap a rickshaw. Now, $3,000 is $3,000, but in the grand scheme of things, to enable this man to have a different type of life, it's not that much. And I went back about 1.5 years ago, and we're on the phone, and he says, Mr. Leon, I want to come and pick you up in my rickshaw. And I was like, Diru, please, do not come and pick me up in your rickshaw. I'll meet you at the hotel. He's like, no, Mr. Leon, I'm coming with my rickshaw. I'm like, okay, all right, okay, God help me. So he comes, picks me up, takes me back to the hotel. I invite him and his family to dinner. And he comes, and he has like a 2-year-old girl. And I'm like, Diru, you have a daughter? And he's like, no, Mr. Leon, this is not my daughter. And I'm like, Diru, I don't understand. You're treating her with so much love and so much kindness. Your wife is treating her with so much love and so much kindness. That must be your daughter. She's like, no, she's not my daughter. I'm like, well, who is she then? And he says to me, well, I have a friend who lives in the slums as well. And he works every night. So every night, he gives me his daughter, and I look after her. And I was like, oh my God. Because I'm telling you, when I saw the way he was treating her, it was clear that it was his daughter. And I said to myself, wow, we have lost a sense of community in the Western world. These people need each other. Yet we don't need each other anymore. We have iPhones, we have Siri, we have Alexa, we have all these things. We don't need each other. Why is it that when a tragedy happens, everyone comes together and the news is like, oh my goodness, look at the great courage and love and kindness we're showing. What about showing that love and that kindness daily to each other as imperfectly as we can? That was a profound thing that I learned.
I wondered what you would think is the difference between someone being kind to you or just them doing you a favour, and whether anyone was expecting anything in return for them putting you up for the night, and what the difference is.
So no one knew that they would receive something. No one. Yeah? The only people that knew that were the 4 crew members and my production team. No one else. So, as you saw when I told Tony, those tears were not fake. They were real. His reaction was one of shock. He had no idea what was about to happen to him. So, I would say that it was pure as pure can be. Yeah, we had cameras. I get it. But it was as pure can be. No one knew what was about to happen. And that was the magic of the show. That you would do a kind act to me, and you'd have no idea. Not everyone got a gift. I mean, I met hundreds of people. I couldn't give gifts to hundreds of people. So they didn't expect anything. You know, when it was time for me to leave their home, they're like, oh, okay, thank you very much, goodbye. Okay, I was like, bye. I'm like, really sorry I didn't give you a gift inside, but whatever. So I don't think they knew. Now for season 2, we may have to be a little bit more cunning, but we'll see what happens. Did that answer your question? Okay, beautiful.
Do you think it might be quite different coming from a female perspective, and people might sometimes want a bit more in return?
It is a great question, truly. Did I have an advantage being a white male with an English accent? Absolutely. Is it possible to do it as a woman? Absolutely. Would it be harder? Yes, it would. But on my journeys around the world, I have seen many women traveling by themselves. So it's possible. Harder? Yes. Possible? Definitely. Based on my experiences of seeing travelers all around the world. Yeah? So you've got to be very careful. You've got to be very careful. I always, like when my friends, my female friends say they're going to travel, for example, in India or wherever, I tell them to be careful. One of the things I tell them is if anyone offers to buy you a drink, don't drink it. Little things I don't have to worry about, but you would. Okay?
I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, we have always promised to wrap these things up at 8:30 because some people have come a long way. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to join me in showing huge appreciation to Leon. But Leon, I had an observation that had been with me all evening. And thank you so much for all this thought-provoking and inspiring stuff. But one of the things that's really struck me with Action for Happiness generally is that, of course, one thing we all discover, I think, when we go on a journey of what would really make for a happy life is we often come across what you shared tonight, that being kind to others is such a contributor to our own happiness as well as others. Another thing I've seen a huge amount, and I wondered if this has come up for you, was that we see lots of people, many in this room, I'd imagine, who are incredibly kind to others, perhaps naturally drawn to this topic, and are actually not, myself included, not so good at being kind to themselves. And we've had this topic of what's the link between kindness to others and kindness to self. And sometimes we're able to be kind to a loved one or a friend, and yet the language we use with ourselves isn't as kind. Is that something that's come up for you on your journey? Is that
very beautiful? So I was having a life coaching session. I wasn't the life coach. I was the life coachee. And I asked my life coach sits there and says to me, Leon? I'm like, yes. He's like, don't you think that since you go out into the world and share kindness with others, that you should be kind to yourself? And he was right. Because I, and I'm sure you, would never let anyone treat you the same way that you treat yourself. And in that moment, he turns around to me and he says, the magic key is to be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And I was like, took me 20 years to figure that one out, but he's right. So that would be the answer.
Well, thank you. And I think that's a lovely note to end on. So please join me in showing Leon huge appreciation. Thank you so much.